Hello, everyone. My name is Linda McDonnell, and I am your host of the Real Christian Moms Quarantine Survival Series. Today, it is my honor and pleasure to introduce you to our expert guest speaker, Karen Doyle Buckwalter. Karen is a licensed clinical social worker and a registered play therapist supervisor, and is also the director of program strategy at Shattuck. Karen is a child and family therapist who has more than 30 years' experience working with families. She has co-authored journal articles and book chapters, as well as articles which have appeared in Adoption Today and Fostering Families Today magazines. Her first book, Attachment Theory in Action, edited with Debbie Reed, was released in 2017, and she also hosts the Attachment Theory in Action podcast. Her second book, co-authored with Debbie Reed and Wendy Lyons Sunshine, Raising the Challenging Child, was released in January of 2020. Congratulations on that. That's an amazing accomplishment.
Thank you so much.
Outside of work, you will find Karen hiking the Blue Ridge Mountains of the Carolinas. Karen, it is such an honor to have you here with me today. Thank you for joining us.
Absolutely, Linda. I'm thrilled to be able to participate in your series.
Oh, thank you. So, Karen, as a family and child therapist with over 30 years of experience, do you have some tips for the moms who are listening today who might have like a challenging child? Do you have some parenting tips, especially as it relates to quarantine?
Yes, I really do. I think my first and biggest tip for moms, I think when you hear somebody that, works with children or writes a book such as Raising the Challenging Child, you're thinking, okay, tips for the children. But really, the biggest tips first are for the parents, and them really needing to take care of themselves so they can be the best for their children. I think, what we're seeing during this pandemic is people having anxiety, people feeling lonely, people feeling depressed, people dealing with a lot of grief and loss of things like milestone things like graduations and weddings and things being postponed. And so I think, and then some of us as parents, we already come to the table that we maybe have a little bit of a tendency towards some of those things, and so then the stress of COVID is kind of putting a magnifying glass on all of that. So I really think, the first thing is thinking about dealing with some of those feelings in yourself. If it's anxiety, maybe you have to limit some of your news exposure. One example. Or, I always say, do things that have a beginning, middle, and an end. I like to iron, it starts out wrinkled and it ends up unwrinkled. It makes me happy,
I love that.
And with loneliness, reaching out through text and phone calls and, still trying to find ways to gather with others, whether it's virtually or socially distanced or whatever is going on in your locale in terms of safety standards. With depression, I think exercise is important for us and our kids. And what we're learning from science now, especially during stressful times, we need what we call dosing of exercise, like maybe every 2 hours walking for 5 or 10 minutes. It's not like that workout during the day is going to get you through the day in terms of mental health and self-talk, what we're telling ourselves. What we're telling ourselves or saying out loud goes into our kids' brains and ears, So if we're saying this isn't going to last forever, or, eventually things are going to get back to normal, things that are going to lower our anxiety and our children's. So, and with grief, I think, acknowledging even to your children, it's been hard not seeing my friends as much, what's that been like for you, so just really ways to cope with some of those things in terms of helping ourselves as parents. That before I go into a list of what we could do for the kids, that is always my biggest message, because we I study attachment theory a great deal. You could tell from the title of my podcast and my book. And what John Bowlby, the father of attachment theory, said is we need to be a safe haven and a secure base for our children.
I
So if
love
we're
that.
all overwhelmed and rattled, we can't be that. So
Right.
that's my first message, is looking at what do you need to be the parent your child needs during a time like this.
Absolutely. I love that. I love, as far as when you were talking about exercise, I have found, I didn't hear about that new research, but I did like somehow intuitively figure that out. I would typically exercise in the morning, but what I was finding is that I needed to bounce on the trampoline with our son in the afternoon, and then right before I made dinner, just to get through that other, set of chores and other responsibilities in the evening, I would hop on the treadmill. I would take our dog for another walk. I
Yes.
realized that my steps on my Fitbit went up, recently, and it's because I'm really trying to exercise. Really helps me to manage stress. So,
Yes,
mhm,
yes. It helps with serotonin and other neurotransmitters. And I think with the stress that is surrounding us at this time, we need that little boost all throughout the day. That, one big boost we're used to doing in the, not that we're discouraging that, keep
right.
that going if you can. But these little boosts throughout the day being so important.
Absolutely. And the moms that I work with, I always try to tell them, don't set such unrealistic standards for yourself. Every little bit matters. If you can only exercise for 5 or 10 minutes in the morning, that's okay. That's a starting point, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes I think when it comes to workout routines or eating healthy or whatever it is, health related, they feel as though if they don't do it perfectly, then it's not worth the effort. And I always say, no, every little ounce of effort makes a difference. You're actually, building yourself up. And over time, it will get easier to do it more consistently.
Linda, I can't tell you how many times saying, if I want to stop in 5 minutes, I can, has gotten me out the door for a run that lasts, 40 minutes. So it's like, baby steps,
Yes,
and, just like you're saying, just a little bit, and not setting the standard so high. And I think, that brings up another overriding principle that has been on my mind. And I will tell you, as a child therapist, a child and family therapist, a lot of the presenting issues that people bring their children to me for relate somehow to anxiety.
mhm,
And I have had to tell it prior to the pandemic, and I have had to tell people, um, it's a little hard to work on anxiety when your child's surrounded by people wearing masks because they think that they could get a virus that could kill them. I mean, so
right.
I'm very much telling people, like, let's just manage status quo right now. Like, if we can, let's not have the biggest goals we've ever had for ourselves and our children.
Right.
Let's just look at, getting by day to day and supporting each other. And like you said, taking baby steps on these things. This isn't the time to, reset all the New Year's resolutions that you had or something. There's just
Exactly.
too much else going on that is having to occupy our brain.
I couldn't agree more. There is so much change in the world in addition, or I guess, yeah, on top of COVID, just
Yes,
with societal changes and just division in our nation. So, I mean, there's so much heaviness, and that's
yes.
all extra. So, I agree with you. I agree 100% that just let's get focus on getting through today with grace, with joy, with as much peace as we can, and as much love as we can.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that phenomenon you're talking about, I don't know if it's original with me, but I started calling it adaption fatigue. We're having to adapt, even just what we're doing, right now with being on Zoom, or thinking about, how do I school my kids online? How do I safely right now do this. What does it mean to use Zoom? Constantly having to learn and adapt to different ways of doing things. It's exhausting. Our brains
Mhm.
like to be on autopilot. They do not like constant novelty, which is what
Right.
this feels like sometimes.
Absolutely. Thank you for explaining that, because now I understand why I'm so exhausted when I lay my head down.
Right. It's sort of, I think of it sort of why vacation and travel are exhausting, because you're out of your routines and you're having to like find your boarding pass and you find a gate, and it's constant novelty. And although we like it, we like vacation, we like to travel, we're never able to just be on autopilot. We're using maps. We're figuring out how to get, the key in the door, and now it's not scanning and the hotel room won't open. I mean, that bombardment is tiring.
Absolutely. I agree.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Because I used to think, why is travel? I mean, I'm leaving, I'm sitting on a plane, I'm going into a hotel room. Why is this so exhausting? This shouldn't be
Right.
so exhausting.
But that is a great way to think about it. I never thought about it that way. So
Yeah.
that's great.
Yes.
So, Karen, I was recently reading an excerpt from your new book, which is fabulous, by the way. And I came across the concept of a relationship bank. So, could
Yes.
you share a little bit about that concept with our audience and maybe give us some specific examples?
Yes, absolutely. So when we think of the relationship bank with children, we're thinking of, we're relaying it to the idea of a bank account. And for a bank account, you have to deposit money, checks, or, however you do it these days. We have to deposit money into the account so that when we want to make a withdrawal, when we want to pay a bill or something like that, we can. Okay, that's a basic concept that everybody understands. So what we're suggesting is we also have a relationship bank account, a relationship account like a bank account with our children, in terms of how much positive we put into that account, so that when we have to make a withdrawal, there's a balance there and the child can better tolerate it. So what does that look like? So let's first look at what deposits look like. Deposits look like affirming your child in something they did really well, or validating their feelings, like, wow, didn't you do a great job on making your bed today? Or, wow, it looks like you're kind of sad about this. I can understand why you should be. So that's an example of that. Any kind of praise, that we're giving our children, those are all deposits. Being able to say, yes, we can go to the store to get your favorite drink or whatever. Or yes, if it's my granddaughter, can we stop and get fries on the way back to her house? All of these little things are deposits. And so that when you have to do a withdrawal, like, no, we can't stop right now. Or no, it's time to we need to do your homework. Or it's time to get ready for bed. Or when you're out at the store and your child's wanting you to pick up something, this time you do have to say no.
Mhm.
And so it allows children to tolerate limits being set on them, and being told that they can't have something or they can't do something. And I think I think sometimes as grown-ups, we don't understand what it feels like to be a little person with so little power,
Mhm.
that
Right.
just imagine if everything in your life at work or with your spouse was typically, no, you can't do that, and now you need to do this thing that you don't want to do. That wouldn't feel good. And so we're looking for opportunities to make deposits, which, like I said, are yeses, are validating something, are praising something. So when we have to make the inevitable withdrawals, don't get me wrong, I believe in structure and limits with children, but when we have to make those withdrawals, the children weather it easier, just like we would. Like if we're on really solid ground in a relationship with somebody, we can overlook that thing that we don't like that happened, or that tone they just used.
Right.
Whereas if we're already really upset and kind of have a low level of frustration with them, that one little thing can just really frustrate us.
I love that. When I read that, I was just like, okay, I started to think about it and I was like, wow, yes, like I do try to praise our son. I definitely acknowledge his feelings. We have, a heart to heart pretty much every day. I check in with him multiple times throughout the day. And actually, before we get on this call, he was a little teary-eyed. And I said, buddy, are you okay? And I said, what's the matter? And because I didn't think anything had happened today. And he
Yeah.
said, Mommy, I just don't know. And I said, okay. I said, well, so we gave each other a hug. And I said, after, I'm done with work, I said, we're going to go out and we'll jump on the trampoline and we'll have some fun later today. And, then he perked up a little bit. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I definitely agree that those
Yeah.
positive reinforcements are keenly important for children.
Yeah, yeah. And right in that statement, you also mentioned something I think I have found is so important for grown-ups, parents, and kids, having something to look forward to.
Yes.
Whether it's even just this little thing that you shared with him that you guys could do later. A lot of the vacations or special events or going to a sports thing have been taken off the calendars.
Right.
And I think finding little things that we can still do to look forward to is really critical. I'm really noticing that if I don't have anything like that on my calendar, and this just feels like this endless slog through everything that we've been talking about,
Right.
yeah, that's not feeling so good. So I've had
Mhm.
to intentionally look for little things to put in the calendar to look forward to. So I appreciate you sharing that example, actually.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, no, I agree. I think we're back to basics, right? I think if the pandemic has taught us anything, it's to go back to the basics. And it doesn't have to be a grand experience, but it can still be meaningful and worthwhile for sure.
Yeah, yeah. I think another tip that conversation reminded me of is that children can't, grown-ups too, can't always find words for what they're feeling.
Yeah.
And so he said, you said what's going on, and he said he wasn't really sure. I mean, it sounds like it may have been sad, but sometimes it's hard to figure out what's going. And so any kind of art or coloring or drawing or even pretend play is ways that children express themselves when they don't have words. It accesses a different part of our brain. It allows things we can play out as children, things we can't talk out.
Okay.
So this is why expressive therapies are, very popular. Using using art, even using movement. So I think too, giving kids ways to express themselves, whether it's through clay, whether it's through coloring, drawing, whatever, is really important right now also.
I agree. I think that's very important. Yeah, because they can, like you said, they can kind of get their energy out. Like if it's like with him, he's not very artistic, and it's really because he feels like he's not a good artist. But we have been drawing together this summer. I bought a book. I said, I want to learn how to draw too. I said, so you and mommy can do it together. And so he was more inclined to do that. But I feel like with him, like just getting outside and just jumping around, and that's where like the imaginative play comes in. He'll say, Mommy, do you want to pretend that we're in this game? And I'll be like, yeah, sure. Let's do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's
And
great.
you see it coming out, like as I mentioned, I have I have young adult children, but I have a just turned 4-year-old granddaughter, and she was out playing in her little wading pool with these little fish that are bath toys. And the one fish came out and was kind of sputtering, and we said, what's going on? And she said, he has fish flu. And it's like, she's working through,
Right.
some of her feelings about all of this,
Oh,
which is good for her to be
yeah.
doing.
That's
Yes.
fantastic. That's so precious. I love that.
Fortunately, she was able to, help him get better.
Get better.
But
Oh,
it's
how
like, yeah,
sweet.
yeah.
That is
So
beautiful. So, Karen, can you explain like why? like having a balance between like structure and like nurture is like so important like during these challenging times.
Yes, yes. So, I mean, the first thing I would say about that concept is I think most parents kind of come to the table stronger on structure. Like, I can set down the rules and I'm a rule maker. And you'll hear one parent say, I'm the disciplinarian, or, these that are stronger with those things. Or a parent that's more strong with nurture. I just want to make sure they're okay. I want to give them lots of physical affection. I'm having a hard time sending them to their room and then not taking ice cream up to them, or something like this. And what we tell parents is children need both. What happens is it becomes sort of a competition or a point of tension. Oh, you're too easy on them, you're too hard on them. And what we're meaning too hard on them would be the more structured person, too easy on them would be the nurture person. And we're really trying to help folks understand children need both.
Right.
They need significant, it's not one or the other, it's a both and.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have trouble and you don't naturally come to the idea of being more nurturing or more affectionate, then we say, maybe look at that. Maybe see if you can bring your ability to provide that for your child up a little bit, versus if you have a hard time ever saying no, or, really laying out some kind of routine for the child. Maybe that's something you, as the high nurture person that just kind of wants to go with the flow a little bit more, maybe that's something you need to look at. But we are trying to avoid this idea that you just need one or you just need the other. Sometimes, I tend to work with some pretty out of control children. Chaddock has a residential treatment program. So we're talking children that are getting, highly aggressive at times and needing out of home placement or even psychiatric hospitalization. So I work with a high level of behavioral disturbance. And, to those parents, they sometimes start to feel like, I'm giving an extreme example to make a point. Well, I'm just a warden, I have to just keep some control in my home and set down some rules, and then they're forgetting a pat on the back, or they're forgetting displays of other kinds of affection, or they're forgetting to affirm or validate things that we were talking about earlier. Mm-hmm. At the same time, children, if they don't have enough structure, and if they don't have any rules, they don't feel safe either. Right. So being able to hurt people, or being able to just run out the door, and, parents just getting kind of helpless about it, that also is not healthy for kids. Sometimes children resist that which they desperately need. And structure is one of those things. They're going to balk at the rules, and they're going to balk at the setting limits. But ultimately, underneath that, they need that to feel safe.
Right.
If you're 10 years old and you're stronger and more control than any grown-up in your life, even though you might fight hard for that control, you're terrified.
Okay.
Right?
Yes.
That no grown-up can keep you safe. No grown-up knows how to manage you when you can't manage you. So just really that whole structure, nurture, balance, and really understanding both are good. But one getting really out of whack and making your home feel like you're running a boot camp isn't good. And the other one that, anything goes, let's just give them a hug and it'll all be fine. That's, we need both.
Absolutely. Well, I find myself definitely more towards like the structure, like end of it. And my husband's definitely more the nurture. He's the laid back one. I always say I'm the feisty one. I always admit that to people. Like if there's something going on, I'm like, yeah, I'm the feisty one.
Yes.
But I've been challenging myself as I work with my son's therapist to like really implement like more fun activities with him to show him that I can be balanced. Like, yes, mommy might expect a lot, and I do have, a certain structure to the day, but he does seem to enjoy that. And that's what the therapist said. She said he really thrives on that. And even if he'll push back a little bit sometimes, she said, honestly, he really doesn't complain about it. So then I say, okay, well, if I have him do like this chore, like vacuum, then what can I do, on the, when he's done with that? Like, what can we do for fun? So I agree. And, I think as parents, we all have different personalities, right? So it's not always easy to just change. Like if you are a structured person, like you don't just like say, oh yeah, anything goes. But you can work on it to make it
Yeah,
more balanced.
yeah. I
Hmm.
think, we have our gifts and graces, and that come very naturally to us. And then other, those gifts and graces, have a shadow side sometimes, if they're gone too far, and we need to bring in these other pieces. So I just completely agree with that. And the other thing is playfulness.
Hmm.
And we haven't necessarily named that, but you've been mentioning it at different times. And you can't be angry and playful at the same time. So,
Right.
I can't tell you something so, maybe there's tension in the house and people have been really at each other. And it can be so simple, like pulling out a balloon and blowing it up and hitting it to each other, like balloon volleyball, like something like that
Mhm.
is so helpful, because you can't laugh and cooperate with getting that back and forth and still stay angry. And it changes brain chemistry. Playfulness releases dopamine and positive brain chemicals. And so even a little spontaneous thing like that for a couple minutes really, and you have to think about it, because if you're stressed and somewhat irritated, that's the last thing you think of doing.
Right. Exactly.
Force yourself. And I promise it will shift the feeling of what's going on between you and the child and the overall feeling of the home.
I love
Sometimes when
that.
I go work, I do in-home therapy with families, and I say, one of my goals today is just to get everybody laughing. Like if I, and this is in some cases families that have not laughed in a very long time.
Hmm. Wow. Right. Getting back to basics, the simplicity of just laughing together as a family.
Yes.
How
Yes.
powerful.
Yeah.
Truly powerful.
Yeah.
So, Karen, can you speak a little bit to like how we like were like parented and how like our history really then predicts how we will parent our children?
Yeah, yeah. So, Linda, this is such an important point, and I don't think it's talked about a lot in some of the parenting literature. But the number one predictor, if we look at the research, and especially in terms of attachment and how we respond to children in need and how we respond to um, uh, challenges from children, is very strongly related to how we ourselves were parented. And now some people will say, I don't want to be anything like my parents. Or
Mhm.
some people will say, my parents were amazing and I want to be a lot like them. And honestly, you're going to, whether or not that's your opinion one way or another, there's going to be a gravitational pull, because that's what you know, that's what you experience. For example, some families will say, my family was not very affectionate. And, I've just mentioned several times what I think of the importance of affection. I don't think children are getting enough physical touch these days, from parents, or even in rough and tumble play and other things. And so they may say, well, my parents didn't really hug us. They didn't really do a lot of that. That makes me a little uncomfortable, and so that may be something that they need to work on. I had one boy I was working with, and he was pretty out of control. He could get pretty feisty. He was pretty hyperactive. He would get up and run away from the table or run away from doing things. He could also sometimes get physically aggressive.
Mhm.
And I remember I was watching the mother with him. And I was thinking, wow, she almost looks like she wishes she could hide. I
Mhm.
mean, when he starts to act like this, she just really, I can tell she's like, I just want to disappear.
Right.
And that, as we looked at that mother's, and she didn't know why, and I could have told her over and over again, he really needs you to kind of come forward when he's like that. He needs you to kind of co-regulate him. By that meaning, set some structure, set some limits, maybe even have to physically hold his hand, so he can't run away or whatever. Could be lots of things. And she explained to me that when she was young, her father was very volatile, and that whenever he was going to really kind of lose it, the kids all knew that they should run to their room and hide. That was the exact word that she used. And I
Wow.
remember thinking, I know, I saw that. I
Right.
saw that feeling when things are getting out of control with your son. I saw and felt in my own system you wanting to hide. And
Mm.
so we could talk about that. We could talk about, oh, wow, like asking you to bring more structure to a situation like that is absolutely terrifying. Like,
Right.
you've been conditioned from the time that you were a little girl. If people start acting like this, like, make yourself scarce. And
Right.
I'm asking you to come forward. And I can't tell you what an important conversation that was with her, because up until then, she just kept feeling like, I can't do it. I don't know why. I agree with what the therapist is saying I should do, but I just can't do it. Like, something
Right.
happens to me and I don't know what happens to me. It's the
Right.
whole idea of getting lots of ideas from parenting books and lots of ideas for a therapist and really buying into them as a parent and going home and not being able to execute it,
Mm-hmm.
not being able to do it. So we really have to understand where we came from and what is triggered inside of us by our children.
Mm-hmm.
Um, or it's going to be an uphill battle to change our behavior.
Wow. Wow. That is powerful. Thank you for, sharing your wisdom and insight on that because I I can understand that. I can think of some examples in my own life how I've been triggered by our son, based on my how I was parented. So that definitely gives me a lot to think about for sure. For
Yeah, and
sure.
it is important, Linda, for us to be able to keep this straight, because sometimes we're reacting to what a parent did to us or didn't do for us instead of what the kid's actually doing.
Yes,
And they're so maybe what they're doing would trigger a to response in you, but when you combine it with, that reminds me of when my father belittled me because I feel belittled by you, it becomes a 10 response.
exactly.
So then this is not matching,
Right. And then your
right?
child doesn't understand,
No, and you don't
right? And
understand. You just
right.
walk away later feeling like, that was
Terrible.
awful. I can't believe I said and did that. I need to apologize. And really being completely unaware of what really happened there.
Right.
Um, and as you begin to pick that apart, you're able to do it less. But as long as it's just in the shadows,
Hmm.
you're not able to overcome it in the
Right.
same way.
Well, I agree. I think bringing all of these things to light, I always say, like, when you bring something to light, then it can be exposed and you can work on it and you can
Right.
improve it.
Right,
And that's
right.
what we all
We have these all of these lines about, in business, it's what's the elephant in the room. In therapy, it's like we're as sick as our secrets. So we kind of know this,
right,
but yet I don't think we always know what the elephant or what the secret is. That's brewing under there
right, right. No, that's
without some help.
yes, and that's why your work is so critically important. And, you know, especially now. I mean, it's critically important at all times, but I think it's even more important now because I really think that the landscape of our lives, it has changed so much. And I feel
It
like we're on the
has.
precipice of something. I feel like, in my opinion, I feel like God really is wanting all of us to learn something, and it may be multiple lessons. So I just
Yes.
feel like your work is just, a huge part of that. So thank you. Thank you for what you do.
Yes. Yes. Well, thank you so much.
So, Karen, would you like to share about the free resource that you have for our listeners today?
Yes, yes. So I have a resource with all kinds of tips on what we're calling pandemic parenting. And so it's a 6-page resource that people can go to, that's available. In addition to that, on my book website, so it's raisingthechallengingchild.com, you can download a free chapter of my book, and you can also download a free Christian-based study guide that goes along with the book. So that's like completely free and something that you could use in your small group, or in a church Sunday school class, or a mom's group, or whatever. So that free study guide is at raisingthechallengingchild.com, which I think you're going to share that link.
Yes.
And then also some of the tips that we've been talking about today, I do have those in a PDF, and that's a Chaddock website that I think you'll share too. So
Wonderful. Yes, I will put the link to that below this video so that everyone will have easy access to it. Thank you for that generous gift.
yes,
Very much.
absolutely.
I think it'll be, I think I'm telling all the moms who are listening, please download that. I don't know any of us who don't need that. I don't know any of us
Yes,
who don't need that extra support at this time. So I
yes.
will be getting my copy.
Yes, yes. Well, I was actually rereading it today before we met, and I'm like, oh man, I need to get this out. I need to be doing some of this myself. Yeah, I wrote that. Am I doing that? So, all of us need reminders and encouragement and support to do these things that are going to be most helpful for us during this time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, where can our listeners find out more about you and like the amazing work that you're doing?
So I work for a place called Chaddock, a faith-based organization that's based in Quincy, Illinois. But the best place to find out about me specifically is to follow me on my Facebook page. So that's Karen Doyle Buckwalter, LCSW RPTS, as you said in the beginning. If you look for it, so that's where I put out my podcast. I put out a lot of articles that I think are helpful for people. I put out things about training that I'm doing. I do have another group that's for therapists, and that's a group for attachment-based therapists. We have about close to 10,000 people in that group from about 45 countries at this point. So
Wow.
if you have listeners that are in the therapy profession, that's attachment-based therapist on Facebook. But www.chaddock.org is where I work, and then more personal to me would be my professional Facebook page.
Oh, wonderful. Well, thank you so much. And Karen, it was just such an honor to have you here today. You shared such valuable insight and wisdom into the world of parenting, which we all know and understand can be challenging at times, but it's also the most rewarding job I believe that God can really gift us.
Yes.
So thank you so much for your time. I just ask that God will continue to bless you and your loved ones and your family going forward.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to be with you.
Oh, great. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you. Bye
Okay.
bye for now.
Bye bye.